US Embassy to Jerusalem. Well, I'm joined now by Representative Don Bacon, a Republican congressman from Nebraska, who's also a member of the Israel Allies Caucus. Thanks indeed for joining us, Congressman.
Well, thanks for having me on BBC.
Now, you were in the chamber for the speech there. Having listened to the Prime Minister, do you think, are we nearer or further away from a peace deal?
I suspect Israel's going to continue this fight until Hamas is destroyed. And they're not going to let Hamas survive in Gaza. And so I think that's the bottom line. I think the Prime Minister made that clear. I also don't think Hamas has a lot more time to fight. I think they're nearing the end of their ability to put up a resistance. But my takeaway was Israel's going to destroy Hamas in Gaza, and the bigger long-term threat is Iran.
Now, the Prime Minister also said at one point, give us the tools faster and we'll finish the job, making a plea for more US military aid here. But we're in the 10th month of this. It's been an extremely violent conflict. We see the horrific humanitarian situation there. Should the US provide more military aid now? Is that the answer?
I think it is. Let's get this war done sooner rather than later. Let's not drag it out. Let's remember, Hamas started this fight. They murdered 1,200 people, raped many people, tortured, and Israel has every right to go in and destroy this adversary that only means to kill Israelis. And I think it's been a tough fight, but one of the main issues is Hamas hides themselves in the population. So who's really to blame? If I was an Israeli, I would want to destroy Hamas. And then the Prime Minister said today he'd want to restore Palestinian governance in Hamas, but it can't be one that is at war with Israel.
Now, he also addressed the protesters, mentioning those outside, but also the student protests that we've seen here and other protests for many months, saying that those protesters should be ashamed of themselves. He described them as Iran's useful idiots. Is that helpful language? He's calling American students idiots?
Well, if you saw them today, they were burning our flag. They were desecrating our statues. I don't know if I call them idiots, but I think they're wrong. And I think we should have moral clarity. These guys are on the side of Hamas that tortured, murdered, raped, and they're a mortal threat to Israel. They started this fight. So I'm not on the side of the protesters. I think they're on the wrong side of history.
But those protesters would say, particularly those student protesters, that they were on the side of the innocent civilians in Gaza, that they can't look anymore at those pictures of dire humanitarian situation.
Well, I think they are morally confused here because it's the Hamas that, first they started the war and now they're hiding in the population centers. And so Hamas is the ones who's putting them in the harm's way by their tactics and strategy. Fact is, Hamas wants to drive up casualty numbers on their side so that the world will put pressure on Israel to stop. In the end, if I was an Israeli, I wouldn't let Hamas survive, bottom line.
But is there a military campaign working, the Israeli military campaign?
I believe it is. There's most of Gaza has been taken back from, removed Hamas from control. They're in only small pockets. The problem is we have 120 hostages still. They're probably in the tunnels, most of them. And Hamas could stop this tomorrow. They could surrender the hostages and lay down their weapons. But they want to hide in the civilian community, putting them at risk.
Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu will meet Joe Biden tomorrow. What are you hoping for from that meeting?
I hope President Biden will commit to getting the weapons sooner rather than later. Quit holding the weapons up, because all that does is delay the war. You know, I think Prime Minister Netanyahu made a good statement today too. They've provided lots of food into Gaza, but Hamas takes it. And so the faster we can stop this war, sooner that we can get relief to the people who need it.
But the peace talks have kind of reached a standstill. We saw today the Israeli delegation delaying their journey to Qatar for the next round. What is going to move this along?
Well, this is my view. I don't think there's any peace with Hamas. You're going to have to kill them or they're going to have to surrender. And I think that's where Israel's at too. You can't coexist with someone who hates Israel and they could go on and murder 1,200 people like the way they did. So I think this fight ends when Hamas either surrenders or no longer exists.
But are either of those realistic outcomes?
Yes, Israel controls most of Gaza, and they have enough troops to go through those tunnels. It takes time, but the faster that we help Israel, our closest ally in the region, the faster this fight gets done, and the faster that we can help bring peace to the people of Gaza that are going through hell right now, there's no doubt. But this is Hamas's fault, not Israel's.
Okay, Congressman
Thank you.
Bacon from Nebraska, thanks for joining us on BBC News. Thank you very much. Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit to